Good morning, everybody. This is Lauren Cohen with Investing Across Borders, international legal and real estate expert. And I am here today to help you find new ways to invest, live, work, and play across borders. And my special guest today is Marco Robert. And I know Marco from CEO Space. We connected about 2 years ago, probably at one of the last live forums that CEO Space had. Now they're doing everything online, but we connected. I obviously detected a French accent and asked where he was from, and we started chatting and getting to know each other and became fast friends because, of course, he's Canadian. And although he's French Canadian, we're still from the same ilk and the same cloth. And now, a year and a half later, Marco is the proud dad of, how old is your son?
8 months.
Of an 8-month-old. And I remember talking with him about parenthood because he was like, I'm not sure, I don't know. And here he is. He is such a proud papa. That's probably what your son calls you, right?
Well, yeah, he doesn't call me much right now,
Right,
but
not yet, but
yeah,
that's what
hopefully someday he's gonna be proud of me.
Right, exactly. It's okay. My brother used to say to me, just wait, Lauren, because of my son, I thought he was slow to talk. And I was like all worried, and I was like, at one, he wasn't really saying much. And I'm like, oh my God, he's never going to walk. He's never going to talk. My brother said, just wait. He'll start walking and talking, and you'll be praying for him to sit down and shut up. And that's pretty much true. So you.
How old is your son now? How old is he now?
10.
10.
He's
Wow.
10, and he's huge. He's 5 feet tall. He's huge.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
He's a big kid. So anyway, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. You are really the epitome of what this podcast is all about, because you really have made your mark literally across almost every border. So originally from Canada, you learned to speak English. We were just talking about this at around 5 or 6. You went into first grade with basic vocabulary because you were determined to communicate with your family and everybody. And that's probably made a huge difference, I'm sure. Do you speak other languages as well, other than English and French?
I speak Spanish as well, because I speak Spanish because I lived in Central America for about 3 years.
I had a feeling that you would say that. So I was talking with someone yesterday, and her niece speaks 5 languages in Mexico and hasn't graduated from high school yet. And I'm like, language is a more important degree than a degree. Because if you can speak multiple languages, you can pave your path to almost anything, especially in the entrepreneurial world.
You know what a lot of people don't understand, Lauren, is that when you learn languages, it helps you think. Like you understand your own language better, because like, for example, when I learned Spanish, you understand how akin Spanish is to French.
Sure.
Well, it helped me understand kind of the root of some words, and it just like it opens up your brain. Learning languages really opens up your brain.
Yes, I'm not a great linguist. I've tried Spanish. I've tried Portuguese. I speak enough Hebrew. When I go to Israel, I can definitely manage. My French is fine. I understand. I don't speak because, even when I say Robert, it sounds terrible because my accent is so terrible. And
it's good. It's good, actually. And I always appreciate it. Most Canadians say that. In America, I'm known as Marco Robert.
Yeah.
But when I meet Canadians, whether they speak French or not, they say, "Oh, Marco Robert," and I'm like, "Yeah."
Well, it's interesting because my name, Lauren, Israelis and another, I can't remember who else, always say my name, Lorraine. Oh, French.
Oh, Lorraine.
It's there, yeah. So because I'm working with people literally from all over the world, as soon as I hear them say my name, I know where they're from.
From.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Tell us when you first did. So first backtrack a little bit. Tell us a little about yourself, Marco, and then tell us about your first foray into cross-border investing or business, if you would.
So, one of my friends described me he said, Marco is a cross between James Bond and my favorite university professor. That's it. And I think that's a great description of me, because
I love it.
I basically travel around the world. I have clients in about 40 different countries. I'm a management consultant, and my job is to help, I help business owners thrive in their own businesses. So I have to travel. It's not rare for me to fly from Singapore to Zurich, or from, Johannesburg to Paris. I mean, I travel around the world all the time, before COVID. And so the journey for me started at a very young age. You and I were kind of alluding to this before we started the podcast, where even as a teenager, I've always known that I was going to become an entrepreneur. My parents owned businesses,
Mm,
and I could feel the freedom of owning your own businesses, even though they worked really, really hard. I mean, my parents were hardly around. They worked really hard, but the
interesting.
freedom, the freedom
Yeah.
of owning the business, and so I've always known, and today it's kind of in fashion to say, oh, I want to own my own business. I want to direct my own destiny. A lot of kids think like that, but back in the 1980s, woo, I was a weirdo because all my friends had career paths.
Right.
I'm going to become an engineer. I'm going to
Right. You
become a
had to go to
nurse, a
school.
doctor.
Yeah,
You had
for
to go to
sure.
school.
I mean, we're the
Yeah,
same age. I had the same stuff. There was no way. My mom's like, you are going, and of course, I never even thought twice. I was going to law school. It was either law school or dental school. That was it. I had no other options. So
yeah. And for me, the big challenge is that school was actually easy. It was so easy that it was almost
boring.
like I'm like, what am I doing here?
Right.
So I couldn't wait to actually start working. So at the age of 22, I mean, I just quit. I mean, I just decided that I was gonna start working. I graduated with a degree in hotel and restaurant management, and then I'm like, okay, that's it. And so I worked in that industry. But one of the things that really, really impacted me is soon after I graduated, I was watching TV, and if you remember, in the early 1990s, Tony Robbins was on TV 24/7. He had his infomercials, and he was on TV all the time. And I thought it was extremely enthralling. I remember watching him at 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, man. But his course, it was called Power 90. It was on cassette tapes, and I think it was like 350 US dollars, which was like more than 400 Canadian dollars. But I watched the infomercial, like I must have watched that infomercial 100 times. At some point, my girlfriend, the girl that I lived with, she said, why don't you just buy it? She said, I'm like, man, it was a lot of money for me, 400 Canadian dollars. I mean, it was more than I made per week back in 1992. But anyway, so I took a chance and I bought the course and I devoured the course. And one of the things that I learned was Tony was a massive reader, and I became a reader. I took some speed reading classes, and I realized very quickly that all the knowledge of the world is confined in books.
Yeah.
I graduated from college without really reading. I never read.
Mm,
I thought reading was kind of like I didn't like reading when I was a teenager. But starting at the age of 22, I became a ferocious reader. I mean, in fact, there were days where my girlfriend would go to work and I would read 3 books while she was away.
wow.
I just speed read, and very soon, probably within a year, I answered the biggest question that I was asking myself, which was, why is it that so many business owners or businesses out there fail? Because when I moved back to Montreal after college, I remember walking down on St. Catherine Street and thinking, hey, there used to be a coffee shop here. What's going on? This is where I used to buy my jeans. What's happening with that place? They're out of business. And I started to realize, man, owning a business has some challenges.
Of
You can
course.
actually lose your business.
For
Businesses go out of
sure.
business. I had never thought of that. In my, wearing rosy glasses my entire life, I just thought, I'm going to own a business. I'm going to become successful. When I realized that some businesses didn't make it, I embarked on this journey of trying to find out, what makes businesses successful. And the first answer I got, I was about 23 years old. I was reading a book, and there's these momentous moments in life, that you're going to remember. I remember this moment like it was yesterday. I'm sitting on my cheap black leather couch in Montreal, Canada. I lived in this apartment complex at 1101 East Rachel Street, right in front of the beautiful Parc La Fontaine. And I'm sitting, the patio door is open. I can feel the breeze coming in. I'm sitting on a couch. I'm by myself in my apartment, and I'm reading a book yet again. And suddenly I have this moment. I'm like, could it be that simple? Could the secret to success be that simple? And I thought, and here's what I thought. I thought, success in business is 100% related to systems. See,
Sure.
Businesses that systemize, that create processes, procedures, checklists, templates, trainings, businesses that systemize tend to fare out much better. Now, at the time, 23 years old, it was a theory. And I theorized based on this.
Well, it was a good theory because it's correct.
Yeah, it was a theory, but it was theorized based on this. Franchises tend to fare out much better.
Yes.
And what are franchises if not like
Systems.
systems? That's what you're buying. So that was kind of the beginning of my journey. You were asking, what's the beginning? That's when my real journey began. So now I went back to work and I tried it. I was managing a hotel in Montreal, and I went back to work and I started to systemize. That's all I did. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just like, okay, I'm going to procedurize. I'm going to create policies. I'm going to create systems. And it worked. I was like 23 years old and I turned around in the midst of a financial collapse in Canada, right? In the early 1990s. I mean, there was a massive downturn in the economy. I turned around a hotel by myself.
Wow.
So I'm like, this stuff works. And then I got recruited to work for a big restaurant in Canada, like the equivalent of a TGI Fridays here in America.
Ironically,
in Quebec, it's
that's
called,
where my son's dad works. Isn't that funny?
Oh, wow. So anyway, so long story, I ended up turning around that restaurant as well. And then that's when I said, okay, I turned to my girlfriend. I said, okay, I think I'm onto something. I think I know how to run businesses successfully. I've done it for 2 organizations. So I said, let's just figure out how to start our own business. And that was the beginning of my journey. That's how it all started.
Well, I love that. So now at this time you were still in Montreal. And what prompted you to want to move beyond Canada? I mean, obviously you always had big dreams, but like what ultimately was that moment when you said, okay, it's time to go?
Well, it's funny. If I say it was an asshole, is that politically correct? Because that's really what it was. Okay?
For the purposes of this, it's politically correct.
All right. Well, so that's really what it was. So I made that decision. I'm like, okay, let's start a business. So I started to work on a business plan. And I worked really hard for probably 3 months doing the research and all of that. And then I went to the bank. Now, I'm not going to mention the bank because I don't think it would be fair for the bank. All I can say is that it has the initials are TD, but I don't want to say the name of the bank, right?
I don't know. That leaves a lot to the imagination. Okay.
So I walk into this bank and I have an appointment with this banker. And I'm all proud. I'm probably wearing a suit, and I push my business plan in front of him. This guy literally flipped through it for like a minute. Okay. And then no joke, this is what he did. He pushed it back to me and he went like, the guy laughed at me and he said something like, kid, nobody's going to lend you money. And I was
probably
so
made
angry.
You determined.
Yeah. I was so
That's
angry.
the ass, whatever. Got it.
Exactly. So I walked out of that bank and I'm like, actually, to be honest with you, there were probably a couple of days where I was like depressed. I'm like, my God, my dream, this guy just killed my dream. My entire life, I wanted to own a business. Basically, this guy is telling me it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So after a couple of days of, wiping out tears, probably not that bad, but I sat down with my girlfriend and I said, what are we going to do? And she's the one, she said, hey, when I was a kid, I used to have a pen pal in a country called Nicaragua. I'm like, oh, Nicaragua. I've heard of that country. I don't know where that is. Remember, that's 1996. That's before really the internet. I didn't have a computer that was connected to the internet in 1996. So Nicaragua, I didn't even know where that was that much. So we started to do some research. We connected with some friends, like hippie friends that had traveled in Central America. And then we decided after months of research and talking with people to actually sell pretty much everything, pack everything else, and put stuff in storage and move to Central America. We were going to go to Belize because we had found out that Belize was an English-speaking country. We didn't speak anything else. So we said, let's go to Belize and let's start a business in Belize. So After months and months of research, by the way, the only research really about the country of Belize at the time, Belize at the time had about 200 people, 200,000 people,
Oh, okay.
the population
Like
of Belize. So
200
it's a very
people.
tiny
What?
country. Yeah, it's a tiny, tiny country. Okay. So any real information that we could gather about Belize came from a newsletter that we bought from an American couple who lived in Belize. So they were expats and they published a monthly newsletter. So I subscribed to that newsletter and they were telling us things about Belize. That's basically all we could find about Belize. So it was kind of a little bit exaggerated. So we landed in Belize and we immediately hated the country. At the time, Belize was a deserted country run by warlords, and we said, you know what? So we hung out there. It's a beautiful country. So we vacationed there for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then we said, okay, we need to figure out something because there's no way we're staying here. So we started to travel, and we ended up in Guatemala, and after several months of making connections in Guatemala, learning Spanish, we decided to actually establish our base in Guatemala. And then in the course of about 2 years, we ended up starting 2 businesses, 2 restaurants. A big one where we actually, we teamed up with the local nightclub owner and we opened a restaurant in his nightclub. So while he was operating a nightclub at night,
Right.
we operated the restaurant during the day.
Saved you a lot of rent.
Yep. We basically ended up splitting the rent half and half with him. And the investment was very little because all we had to do was build a kitchen in the corner.
Right.
So that was pretty cool. And then on the same street we lived, the same street where my nightclub was located, there was another restaurant, and the guy was kind of a creperie, a French guy, from Paris, and he was struggling a little bit with his business. So I ended up picking it up for very little money and bought his restaurant and opened a second restaurant as well. So we operated these restaurants for a couple of years and then ended up selling them. The first one we sold to the brother of the nightclub owner. And then the second one we sold to a local journalist who just was looking for an investment. And then we went back to Canada. But it was an amazing. It was the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, by the time I left Guatemala, I had about 50 employees in Guatemala.
Wow.
Between those 2 restaurants.
Of course, they're, $3 an hour, but.
Yeah, not even. I mean,
it's crazy.
The minimum wage at the time was, I think it was 150 Canadian dollars per month.
Wow.
So we paid a little bit more than that, but it was like that was the minimum wage, 150 Canadian dollars per month.
So you were really ahead of your time looking at other locations to set up your business and create opportunities, not just for yourself, but for others. And that's the beauty of what you were doing. So it says here that in 1998, you were banking and investing in the Bahamas through a holding of international business companies. So that's your kind of holding company in IBC?
Yeah. So the first thing I want to address is what you said just before that. I'm happy to talk about,
of course,
IBCs and all that stuff. But you said something here that I think your listeners, you said something very, very important.
Yes.
You said something, so I'm going to paraphrase, but you said, so you basically had the guts to travel and establish yourself in a different country. And honestly, today, that's what I teach my clients. I say, as a youth, as a young boy in my 20s, I discovered that the secret to success in business is systems. I still believe this wholeheartedly. In fact, I created a framework today for actually systematizing businesses, right? It's called BOSS, Business Optimizing Strategic Systems.
And it
so
works
it's a series
globally.
of systems. It works in all businesses. I've actually implemented it myself in over 800 businesses. And I've introduced the concept to probably another 10,000 business owners worldwide over the last 2 decades. But so BOSS is a series of systems designed to strategically optimize any business, right? So I'm still a huge believer in that. However, I believe now in hindsight that the root of my success was not to discover that businesses are based on systems. The root of my success was not allowing life to control me. Because you see, that guy at Toronto Dominion could have squashed my dreams.
Absolutely.
And he came really, really close to it. But what happened is I said, no freaking way, right? And it's the character. Now, I was probably born with that character, or it was based on, you know, the environment that I grew up in. I don't know. But it's that resiliency that said, no freaking way, right? If I hadn't said that, I would have simply gone back to my really cozy job, and I'd probably still be there today, right? Managing the TGI Fridays, right? So that is the number one thing I think to success. And it shows up before systematizing businesses. In fact, today I have named the profile of the entrepreneur that becomes successful. I've given it a name. I call it the outlier entrepreneur, because I've actually ended up researching that. You know, who's that person? Why is it that you have two people with the same degree, two people with the same aptitudes, the same chances, one massively succeeds and one fails miserably? Why is that? It's the character, it's the profile of the person. So I call them outlier entrepreneurs because, number one, outlier means somebody who sits outside of the norm, right? An outlier is a piece of data that sits outside of the norm, number one. And the word entrepreneur, if you look at the root explanation or the definition of the word entrepreneur, it basically means a person who undertakes. So what do entrepreneurs undertake? Well, they undertake to create value for the world. Right. They undertake to solve problems. So if you are a problem solver who is also affirmed in their own uniqueness, you have the root of making it in life.
Yeah,
so you need to become a problem solver.
And to add to that, so the about the outlier, what's the book called? I can't think of the name. Is it The Outliers? You know, the one with the number one on the—
Yeah, I think it's called The Outliers with Malcolm Gladwell.
Right.
I think it's
but
called
there's
Outliers.
Another one as well written. Oh, Essentialism. I'm sure you're familiar with that book.
I haven't read Essentialism.
Essentialism is about kind of the one thing that you need to focus on, because one of the challenges I think for entrepreneurs is that there's a lot of squirrels, right? There's a lot of distractions. There's a lot of noise. Right now, there's this new app. I think you're on it because I think I let you in. And that new app could be a heck of a lot of noise for a heck of a lot of people every single day. And I see people sitting there 24 hours a day. Like what? Like, and then you do have to get things done. So if you're able to focus, right? And like, you know, Marco, I've spoken to you, I've been through some challenges in my business, you know, real challenges. I'm a single mom and, you know, it's not always easy, but
yeah.
When I focus and I brought all of the pieces together, now I'm sure you've been watching me. I'm specializing in helping people immigrate to real estate. Everybody loves it, especially Quebecers. They're like, oh, I can use my real estate and get access to the US. So it's all about, I think you're right, it's about systems, but it's also about focus. And if you're a true entrepreneur, the number one challenge you're going to have every day of the week is a lack of focus. And if you have systems, they're going to drive your focus. So it's kind of interconnected. Would you agree?
100%. In fact, what I did is I systemized, quote unquote, this idea of an outlier entrepreneur, right? Because I've done 30 years of research to try to understand who's that person who becomes massively successful. And I created kind of a system. It's basically, I call them the 4 keys to success. You can literally identify the profile of a successful person into 4 different categories. Number 1, they have a keen mastery over their emotions. See, while normal, average, ordinary people out there allow the world to impinge on their own emotions, the successful entrepreneur actually has a filter where he or she does not allow the outside circumstances to come in and affect how he or she feels. Right. So it doesn't matter if it rains or if it shines.
You stay.
It doesn't matter if I make $1 million today or if I lose $100,000. I have this ability to control my own emotion. It's mental toughness, right? And they all have it. Number 1. Number 2, stamina. So if number 1 is emotional toughness, number 2 is physical toughness. You find that the people who succeed have a a constant desire to try and find ways to thrive physically, right? They're always like, seeking out advice from experts. They're taking more vitamins, more supplements. They're exercising. They know that if my body does not thrive, I'm not going to be able to thrive. If I cannot sustain a 20-hour work day once in a while, I'm not going to succeed. If I allow different foods in my body, it starts affecting my mind, my hormonal system, and I cannot think properly, and I cannot succeed as much as I want. So you find that they have a keen desire to constantly try and find out how to thrive physically. Number 3, they all have a very, very clear understanding of who they are. While most people think they do, they don't. Right? And this is not me saying that. This is years and years of psychological studies saying that people have no idea. In fact, when people think if people think that who they are is pointing in this direction, most of the time who they really are is pointing in the exact opposite direction.
For sure.
So funny enough, today we live in a world where there's lots and lots and lots of psychometric analyses that some of them are free. Like you can do DISC, you can do Myers-Briggs, you can do there's so much psychometric analysis. Yeah. My favorite one is something called wealth dynamics. It was devised by a friend of mine called Roger Hamilton, probably about 15 years ago. And wealth dynamics helps you understand what kind of an entrepreneur you are. There's 8 different types of entrepreneurs. So by understanding your strengths and deciding to apply your life and play the game of life within your strengths instead of trying to overcome your weaknesses, makes you very hard to beat in life. See, most people, the guy grew up in a family of attorneys and he says, "Oh, I need to be an attorney." Well, but you're not really an attorney. You are more of a handy person. Maybe your core skills are more to be a handy person. So maybe you should be a craftsman instead of being an attorney. But your dad was an attorney, your uncle was an attorney, your mom was an attorney. You're like, maybe I should become an attorney, right? And then you wake up, you're 40 years old, 50 years old, and then you're like, man, where's my life? I hate my life, right? Or vice versa. The kid is like, when he's 12, he likes to paint, and he's just like, oh my God, I'm going to become a painter, because with the youth essence in him, he loves that. That's awesome. But maybe his core strength is a bit more analytical. Then he finds himself without a degree. He's 28, 30 years old, doesn't have a degree, and now he doesn't like painting anymore, right? So to understand your core strengths and to decide consciously to play life according to your core strength, not your desires, not your whims, not your fancies, not your emotions, who you really are. So you need to look into that and then find out what your strengths are, and then you play that game. That's number 3. And number 4 is you find that the people who succeed more in life tend to have a very clear understanding of how the world works, right? So they are constantly looking and trying to understand, why is it that people behave differently inside of a group than they behave individually? So they're very attracted by the social sciences. They're interested in politics, not the debate on MSNBC or CNN or Fox, but the science of politics. They're interested in that. They're interested in sociology, psychology, economics, the social sciences, because this is how we live. The social sciences is how we live as human beings. And if you don't understand how we live as human beings, it's going to become almost impossible for you to thrive in a human being environment. So those are the 4 qualities of the outlier entrepreneurs, right? This is how I systemized it.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, it's really important. I mean, no matter what type of assessment you do, there's also, the assessment about what types of people will react best with you, which is equally as important. Or how do you interact with certain types of people? Because, high Ds are going to react differently with a high C in the DISC profiling than with a high I. And, I'm going to go crazy every day of the week with a high C because I don't have time. I just want to get it done.
Same here. But at the same time, I need those high C's.
You need it, exactly.
Because because I can't manage my life without those
Exactly.
ICs and IS.
Exactly. 100%. 100%. So Marco, I was going to ask you, you mentioned in here, tell us, when you first were investing outside of your country, you had unfortunately a very similar experience to me. Would you like to share that with us?
Yeah, I don't know about your experience, but basically what I did is my first outside experience. So I left Canada, and Quebec allows you to take a holiday of insurance and stuff like that, right? So we
Yeah.
basically left, and we said, okay, and you can still be covered under the healthcare for a year. So we did all of that, and we ended up moving. And at the time, I don't remember because it's been more than 20 years, but it was a lot easier, for Canadians to have accounts all over the world, right? It was a lot easier. A lot of this stuff did not have to be reported, and oh yeah, this is what happened actually. So we ended up not being residents. We were not residents of
Right.
anywhere officially, and for people who don't understand, your residency is where you pay taxes, right? So, you can be a citizen, you can be a resident, or you can be domiciled someplace, right? Well, so we were Canadian citizens. But we had basically told Revenue Canada that we were not going to be living in Canada anymore. So we ended up moving to Guatemala, and then after selling our businesses in Guatemala, we didn't have a tax status in Guatemala either. So what we did is we ended up taking all the money and investing it in the Bahamas. So the Bahamas at the time, and I haven't looked into their legislations in a long time, but at the time, you could set up what's called an IBC, right? International Business Corporation.
That's right. Okay.
It's just a type of corporation. In the United States, we have LLCs, we have C Corps. Well, it was called an IBC. And an IBC was restricted from doing business in the Bahamas. So it was the kind of business that you would set up that would allow you to do business anywhere around the world except in the Bahamas. And your income was not taxable in the Bahamas, right? So the company that I owned, its income was not taxable in the Bahamas, and it was a Bahamian company. And I did not live in Canada anymore. We had sold the businesses. We ended up we were tourists in Mexico,
Right.
So I did not have a residency anywhere. So I did not have to pay taxes.
Wow,
anywhere.
That's a good loophole.
Yeah. So I basically traveled around the world with my Canadian passport, but I was not a resident anywhere. And so my IBC was accumulating money tax-free. And all I did is I was managing my portfolio. So you can imagine, and by the way, some people may not know that, but when you get to the point, and I always say that to my clients, I say, you need to get your ass there as soon as possible. I call it reaching escape velocity. And if you know anything about physics,
no, but
well, what I'm saying is that in order to escape the Earth's atmosphere, you have to reach something called escape velocity, right?
Okay.
And then once you reach that, then you can actually escape the atmosphere. And then once you're in open space, then it's a lot easier. You don't need a lot of energy at that point, but you need a lot of initial energy just to escape. And that's what most human beings will never actually reach escape velocity. So they don't reach enough momentum, financial momentum, to escape. But that's the first thing. You have to reach that financial momentum as soon as possible, so that you can escape So for us, I basically I was renting a condo in Puerto Vallarta, in Puerto Vallarta. I don't know how to say it because I was Puerto Vallarta.
Puerto Vallarta.
Yeah, I always say Puerto Vallarta because that's how they say it, Puerto Vallarta. But so we rented a condo, and we spent the winter in Puerto Vallarta, and I was just managing my money. My money was owned by companies in the Bahamas. That's it. So, and that went really well until I ended up doing some investments with a group of other investors, and that's what I was gonna say. When you get to those international financial centers, you have tons of opportunities that are not even afforded to the average person, right? There's tons and tons of opportunities outside of the normal Canadian system or American system.
Yes.
And by the way, please, I want everybody to understand, I'm not giving you advice. Okay, the jurisdictions, the laws have changed a lot since, you know, the late 1990s. And if you need to do your homework, you need to hire an attorney and find out, okay? Because today, one of the fastest ways to end up in jail is to play in international financial centers.
Absolutely.
You have to be very careful and know what you're doing.
1000%.
Yeah. So this is not advice. This is a story, right? So back then the laws were different and everything was different. So so we ended up. I was managing my money, whatever, and then I was gonna. Oh yeah. So we ended up actually pooling our money with a lot, like a group of other investors, and that money was being managed by a friend of mine, and that friend of mine ended up basically stealing $1 million from me.
Right. Yeah.
So at the
Do
age
you
of
take
30,
your eye off the ball and just
yeah, I took my eye off the ball, and then this guy
what
basically
happens? Exactly.
he stole $1 million from me. So, and I didn't. It's not like I had $15 million. Okay, I had just a little over $1 million. So I was not. It was because the returns were so high. I started by putting a few $100,000, but eventually the returns were so high that I had almost all of my money with him, and he ran away with it. And because all the transactions took place in the Bahamian jurisdiction,
Right.
Try to we call the RCMP in Canada.
Not much
They're
you
like,
can
okay,
do.
we can't
So
do anything.
when you have a tax haven, there's downside too. I mean,
That's right.
so
That's right.
you had an
So-
opportunity, but you also had the drawback at the end of
There's a
because of
drawback.
that. So there's good and bad to all of it. And that's why it's so important, like Marco said, to hire the proper counsel and make sure you work with an accountant and make sure that you work with professionals that really understand both sides. And if they don't, like I have a client investing in Honduras now. I'm not a Honduran lawyer. I don't even know the law there. I mean, it's civil law, like in Quebec. I don't know it. I don't know how it works. And you have to recommend that, you know, she has somebody to guide her there, not just on how to structure here, but also on how to make sure you're protected there. And that's super important. So, Marco, so at the end of the day, you are teaching companies how to scale and grow. That's how we originally connected, because I had a system called Scale Up Checkup. And you have an amazing way of doing that internationally. You can really move across borders painlessly. You're like a diplomat, as you said at the beginning, because you can basically flit under normal circumstances from country to country. It might be a little more difficult now. You have a son. Things change a little bit because kids ground you. But at the end of the day, you're definitely an expert internationally in your field. It's great to be partners with you. You know, I hope you'll join our webinar on the 13th, Immigrate Through Real Estate, so you can really grasp the scope of what we are focusing on here, because I think you'll probably have a lot of people interested. And it's on I'm not even sure if your podcast will launch by then, but we'll be, and I'm doing it in Spanish on the 19th. And I don't speak Spanish, so it's going to be, I'm doing it with my partner. So who does? Otherwise, we're in trouble. I did one in French a couple of weeks ago, and at least French I can get by.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
So it's great to have you here. Thank you for taking some time. How do people find you?
I mean, it's as simple as Googling my name, Marco, M-A-R-C-O, Robert, R-O-B-E-R-T. I have a bunch of different websites. Probably a good website to find out more about me is meetmarcorobert.com.
That's pretty simple. Meetmarcorobert.com. R-O-B-E-R-T.
Yeah.
So meet Marco
That's right.
Robert.com.
Yeah, but just Googling me. I mean, I have a YouTube channel, LinkedIn, tons of articles, videos, and stuff like that.
And
So
thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm sure we'll be connecting very soon. And take care. Happy New Year. And all the best.
Hey, Happy New Year to you too. Hopefully 2021 is going to be an amazing year for you. I wish you an amazing year in 2021.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lauren.
Have a great one. Bye for now.
You too. Bye-bye.